and then maybe even have a recitation of sorts of our own that includes the collective back and forth. So, by the time we come to code of conduct resolution, and we can make reference to, using the constitutions in the code of conduct in terms of the turtle work, that's mentioned throughout the code of conduct presentation you guys have together, proposal. Or maybe we do these things simultaneously. I don't know, but that's one of the things that I was thinking about after our last session as to what may make sense in terms of thinking about what to test the tooling out with, right? But also use it, right? It'd be really cool use cases for the tooling, even if it wasn't testing. But I don't know. Maybe some of these things are so important that it makes sense to have representatives at this point in time. Or to have representatives before we get to that point in time. I don't know. I'll just throw all those things into the table broadly. But yeah, welcome, Eric. Good to see you, man. Hopefully your connection is okay. I know you were in mountains last time. We're just getting started. I was just throwing onto the table some of the things that we may make a productive meeting out of. But yeah, we can do an opening as well. Now that we have folks here. Hey, Eric.
I was just saying thank you, and yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah. Beautiful to have you, Mike. Yeah, how do you guys feel? Is anything lingering on your guys' mind? Any thoughts on some of those things that I mentioned before we get into the opening?
Just one thought is that I think that one of the reasons why we started working on that workflow before we started looking at all these things that have been brought up recently on the Living Code of Conduct, and the reason for that was the situation that had occurred already, and the realization that there needed to be some kind of workflow that we could step up and help people with resolving their conflicts. So I think that it's important, as you're saying, in order that we need to create or talk about or come to consensus and dialogue on the living code of conduct, and then we can still continue to work on the workflow if we need to. Or I think it's fairly built out right now to just walk through if we need it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's already fairly functional. It's one of the beautiful things about it being such a comprehensive proposal, well thought out before you guys even brought it to folks for consensus. And like I mentioned at the end there, maybe it makes sense to do this thing simultaneously. Just that additional point of conversation using the tooling. I don't think it can hurt us, even without reps. When I think about it, right? But it just seems like important work. But maybe that's a good thing to also test out who would make good representatives, right? Who's taking the work as serious as it needs to be taken, seeing the value in the living constitution simultaneously as well, right? Might be a good thing to have some of these issues running simultaneously, which is possible, right? Like you would think when the tooling is in the full swing of things, there can be a whole list of issues per clan. Maybe some things make it out of each clan, but maybe some things stay inside of clans. But I don't think it can hurt to have simultaneous issues going, particularly if they can be handled in the same real-time meetings and coordinated as such. So yeah, how fleshed out it is already, and the fact that we could at least point to discussion that's happening simultaneously. is better than, pointing to something that is completely non-existent, right? In terms of folks being able to wrap their heads around why, what exactly we mean by living constitution, right? Because it's actually loaded with entire discussions, right? Like it doesn't do too good of, it's not described in its namesake. So, I think the real-time sessions that the tooling can engender can hopefully lend itself to the type of conversations that need to be had to communicate these concepts that we've come to value in these recent sessions together, and understanding some of this 201 dialogue together. So yeah, there's some things on my mind. But let's do an opening before we get too ahead of ourselves. If anybody can start the event, it would be appreciated. I don't have the permissions for whatever reason. It's fine if we can't as well. It shouldn't be a big deal. Yeah, I'll start by introducing myself. I can do an opening unless somebody else would like to. It's open for everybody. You don't have to do it exactly the way we do it, with trying to use some of the indigenous language at all. You can just general give thanks. The things that we tend to give thanks to, that kind of bigger than us in this ecosystem. But for future reference, if anything. I'll start. Harold Jonjas, Gail Jonjon Gail. Introducing myself and my mother. Yonjat Danuka Yodaskade Gay, which for myself means I'm temporarily under the protection of the Bear Clan through the Five Nations Longhouse Confederacy, through 201 Dialogue, Begini De Ahade. And we usually start by giving thanks to Gunsaze, or the great spiral of creation, right? At this broadest level, giving thanks for design, right? This design of regeneration, sustainability, understanding how important this is for us to understand before going into sessions like this and getting into some of the innovation that we're really passionate about, whether it's community building or technology that can come from it. From there, we give thanks to Yonki Sotagat Aqua, or our grandmother Moon, understanding through this Indigenous dialogue some of the important role that the moon plays in these regenerative cycles, right? At some of those broader levels, getting the earth turning, starting the atmosphere, regenerating the atmosphere every moon cycle. This beating heart-like function for our Mother Earth, right? Who we give thanks to next. Yonkini Stoha, or Honsa. This is our Mother Earth giving thanks to this body, right? In all shapes and forms that she gives, not just us, but all strains of life. This regenerative sequencing extended to this level, right? Giving thanks to all of the life givers, in all shapes and forms that they come in all strains of life, including each baby girl, each grandmother. We thank them for being our direction and our purpose, understanding that with the help of our ancestors of the good mind, we can help restore this sequencing or matrilineal heritage authority in this sense, with the important balance of consensus, of course, in the sense of consensus as it relates to the cosmologies of these indigenous people and the land that they grow out of, original peoples, right, of this hemisphere particularly, but all over the world, no matter where what we imagine divides us, right? We all have this matrilineal heritage. And from there, we go on to thank all of the medicines and all the shapes and forms that they come in, including each other, from the waters to the important three sisters, or corns, beans, and squash. Corn being Oneste, if I'm not mistaken, is important for understanding of commons, understanding the regenerative sequencing that's important to commons, that gives us some of the insights to community and the intricate relationship between true autonomy and connection to collective and mutual aid. that we've uncovered together. We also recognize that if not for being in conversations like this, or whenever we find ourselves in conversations that aren't directly addressing some of these broader things that we give thanks for, right? And we're not addressing water preservation or even space conservation or sustainability in some of these more on the ground ways. We're doing a whole lot in terms of neglect, right? In terms of complicity in destroying these things in a hyper extractive system, right? And so we want to give thanks to these things and kick us off right and setting the tone. These are to go to good echoes are the words before all else, before we can hopefully have some continued productive meetings that we've been having. And I think today, if I missed anything, please put it in its proper place. And I'll go. Yeah, so I think I forgot to mention the Guyana Rasa Skanagoa there. Guyana Rasa Goa Skana, right? The Great Laws of Peace, which is important for some of what we were mentioning about the code of conducts earlier, right? And what we can get some more voices. I think Hero, you still may want to speak to some of this. Fred, if you can, of course, you're welcome to speak to it. This idea of maybe simultaneously rolling out these issues to get folks coming together on it in their clans. Adding to the clans too, I think would be something we can make use of the women's clan and the men's clan channels for. Understanding that there may be folks still with not designated any temporary roles, and we can really leverage Bear Clan as a default if folks are unaware of some of the nuances of the concepts, but use that as some important bridge work to ensure voices are being included. Folks know what's happening even with the tooling, right? Firsthand, So I'll just throw all that on the table and leave the floor open. Thank you guys all for being here, of course, and let's see where we go. No worries. Maybe Hero, you had something to add. I'm not sure. I know you were thinking of this code of conduct for some time, and I know you started a thread about it in the men's clan channel already. And I pretty much added my 2 cents here that I added there, right, in terms of the importance of consensus in the indigenous context, right, is a lot different than 100% consensus, right, is a lot different than what might be imagined 100% consensus outside of the indigenous context. And us trying to emulate as much as possible the structures and design of these indigenous contexts for all of the aligned reasons, an impact that it can have on the technology, in the communities, right? It makes sense to, I guess, have this same concept of consensus, right? Where it's not 100%. Everybody has to agree based on opinion. As especially in I think today's world where things are almost hyper opinionated and been monetized, right? The opinions, and this access to the indigenous law recital, but also access to our own law recitals or our own constitution, oral constitution recitals, opens things up, right, to a new type of consensus possibility, consensus that's based on this collectively defined law that is of the good mind when it comes to sustainability or regeneration, autonomy, these things that that play into one another in very important ways, as we find, right? So, yeah, I guess I just want to clarify some of that when it comes to these living constitutions, right, or living these oral recitals, what it can open up for us in the conflict resolution piece that I tried to point to a little bit briefly, right, just by mentioning living constitution. We can do that, right? Kind of take the opinion out of conflict resolution, right? Not to negate voice, but to ensure that we have a point of reference, right? Otherwise, that important role of turtle in the flow that you guys laid out, right? Or the important role of many of the clans, for that matter, right, are intricately connected to the understanding of this indigenous constitution, but also for our context, it would make sense for those people to also understand our oral constitution, right, or have participated, have had, their own recollection of what makes up that oral constitution. Because from all of our different perspectives, there will be a different understanding and different interpretation that maybe even didn't get spoken to, but was understood during the recital. And I think this is some of the ways that we'll get a very nuanced flexibility to our conflict resolution, or for anything that gets us back to referencing our own oral constitutions or what we've learned from the indigenous oral constitutions. And so, yeah, I want to throw that on the table for you, Hero. And I know I mentioned it in the thread briefly, but I know it's loaded with all of that as well. And so, just to make it clear, as to it's not something we didn't touch on earlier in the session either, but yeah, I don't know how we could. Maybe it's just a quick reference to living constitution somewhere in the documentation. Maybe it doesn't even make the visual, but it's somewhere in the documentation that accompanies the visual for the code of conduct. I don't know how you see it being implemented in terms of it being seen somehow, but I just want to throw it on the table as you asked for people to add to the proposal, right? And that would be probably my one addition to the proposal, coming off of our session we had with the Longhouse together, the things that it led to. But yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the way I see code of conduct is more like in the traditional world, like if you were entering a company, like you would, get sometimes maybe a handbook, or like you'll be introduced what are the general rules or etiquettes or um, stuff about the company culture about that company. Um, so I think for me, it's more like almost like some foundational knowledge that you may all need to have an understanding of. Some people may have better understanding of it than the others, say the turtles, but everybody would have a basic understanding of it. Um, Therefore, I think perhaps it's worth, if it's as important as it is, which it sounds lately like it does serve a important knowledge base for a point of reference as we make assessments about various different things, right? Therefore, if it's important, then I think it might be worth having that foundational knowledge built into some of the onboarding process and perhaps the reoccurring process for the community calls. So, for example, how I perhaps would think about it would be like maybe a newcomer would get introduced, like there is actually this code of conduct thing that is like a little basis of stuff that would get verbally communicated at the beginning, but like briefly, so that person has awareness that this thing exists and this thing is important, and you follow up with certain regular um, calls about the living constitutions or great law of peace, maybe once a month, so that everybody get a chance to upgrade their knowledge all together and have a live um, debate or like band brain thoughts, banter kind of stuff. Um, yeah, so that was my thought, and then I think that will naturally be part of all new all new flows that we come up with. So, for example, like the code of conduct for conflict resolution, we don't necessarily need to write it in there already because it's already it already is um, built in. Like, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I agree. I like that idea a lot. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned, what could be some reoccurring introductions to the indigenous context, and we can combine that with engendering our own oral recitations that can happen in some reoccurring fashion as well, as we mentioned in other sessions. So, yeah, these sessions are coming together, I think, to give us a good understanding of how to approach ensuring that these concepts are built in, as you say, and don't necessarily have to be made explicit everywhere, especially if it's going to convolute things. It just as long as it's made explicit somewhere, and that can be in onboarding processes, like you're saying, and we can definitely ensure to include it in things like the portal, general framework that we're thinking of to supplement, right, things beyond just the Discord chat, which I think is where we left off in speaking to Nat. So welcome, Nat. Pleasure to have you as always, Mike. We're just touching on some possible approaches to additions to some of the code of conduct proposal that Hero initially got started in active issues, and we were thinking of any needed additions to it before we reignite it. And Hero just made a very good point of ensuring that we have some of these deeper concepts that we touched on in previous sessions around the value and benefits of living code of conducts or oral constitutions. I don't know how much you caught of it, Nat, in previous sessions as of late, but Prima Vera Felipe out of Harvard blockchain research is a big inspiration for our own research, and Juliet recently following some of her recent language around code of conducts, which led to some discussions of our own around the importance of them, which started to get some things clicking in my head around some of the historical overlap between wampum belts, pledges, peace treaties, and code of conducts, right? The importance of oral constitutions to the so-called governance protocols or matrilineal management protocols for long-term sustainability that we've become more and more familiar with. Just in recent sessions, it actually were sparked by advocates' dialogue and questions around turtle, wolf, and bear. And some of the things that we got in response was the importance of the understanding of law throughout the clans, but particularly when it comes to turtle and wolf, right? These important roles of observer, validator, initiator, facilitator, and of course, bear need a fundamental understanding of this as well. But these particular questions around Wolf Clan and getting some of our own consensus flows started. Got the Longhouse speaking pretty elaborately on the ins and outs of the well of Wolf Clan, and one of the things that came out of that was this being able to this ability to not include opinion, right? As we all will have them based on our varying circumstances and backgrounds, but then to be able to refer to this collective oral law, this collective oral constitution, and refer to it beyond just black and white, understanding that whatever gets written down is only really a memory of what the real code of conduct is, which is this living oral constitution. And I think it taps into the power of, what a lot of folks aren't exposed to, and the ubiquity of oral constitutions in indigenous modes of organization. A lot of that power being the voices of everybody being included in the law inherently, right? Folks being able to recall the experience through memory, beyond just the representatives, right, that maybe have the most responsibility to apply laws instead of opinion when thinking about administration for long-term sustainability and fairness, right? But for everybody, right, this ability for everybody who participates in the oral recitation of a constitution to be able to recall their own what was the collective interpretation, or what was the collective understanding. And sometimes even without voicing it, right, there can be something understood that, the collective could agree on if it was referred to, right, as a point of law in conflict resolution, or in another point in governance or decision making, right? When we're trying to figure out whether or not something is of the good mind or not, right? Whether or not it's conducive to sustainability long term, regenerative relationships long term, right? And so building this into our code of conducts, but building it in this living oral way, should really do us a whole lot of good in terms of the benefits of unlocking us from conventional structures when we go to apply a code of conduct to each other. We'll have something deeper than just black and white, right? We'll have a shared experience, a shared understanding, and a point of reference to our own oral constitution, but also those of us that are tapped into the indigenous context will be able to point to that broader context as well and show the connections. And so this is kind of where we are, Ned. It's beautiful to have you. This is, I think, a good summary of some of the things that we've learned, together about what's possible with the code of conducts. Primavera plays with this in-between space quite often, whether it's her exstitutional theory instead of institutional theory, right? This ability to protect community values, like an exclosure, protect them from institutional structures that can really squeeze the sustainability out of communities, or out of generators of value trying to come together. And she plays with this language of illegal that Juliet has brought to some of our discussions as of late. And so understanding the history of the Tuawampum peace treaty that I think I may have told you a little bit about, Nat, and others here, it reminded me of that, right, in some of these discussions with Juliet, the fact that there are all these settler colonist nations internationally recognizing this Five Nations flag, right? International waters, it has this international jurisprudence, nation-to-nation status that a lot of Native folks don't enjoy the same jurisprudence because unbeknownst to them, they've signed it away. But when they do sign it away, the Tura Wampum is referenced on the black and white papers of Canadian courts, right, of U.S. courts, right, all the way down the hemisphere and cross country lines, right, and that's not a reference to more black and white, right, because the Tura Wampum Peace Treaty is a wampum belt that was orally agreed to, I'm sure, by all of these different settler colonists from the Dutch through French, English, American, right? And so this crosses over to real-world jurisprudence that has had impact on the ground since 2006, and these vessels of the Sea Shepherd that get to continue whale conservation efforts that they would have had to stop dead in their tracks if not having access to this jurisprudence, because Japanese and Canadian states teamed up to ensure that their vessel had its registration revoked, right? So literally, ambitious goals like that get stopped, or they continue with exposure to this in-between legal space, right? So to be able to bring that into the code of conduct world, right, in the Web3 space, but to be able to then have it have tangible connections to authentic and matrilineal indigenous dialogue, right, built into our technologies, built into the systems that these technologies go into on the ground, is a fairly powerful idea and concept that we get to be a part of, if we take it seriously. So this is a big part of where we are, Nat, and others with us, in terms of being able to get this into our tooling and flows for discussion, and hopefully you guys can do your best impression of myself when communicating some of these deeper historical precedents and exciting things. Right? So, but yeah, welcome, Nat.
Yeah, man, great. Good to be here. Good. Loving it, man. And still reading through. I'm still reading through all the time. Obviously talking to people about it as well. So I'm not talking to my team about it all the time. And Doc obviously he's just working on something at the moment. That's why he couldn't jump in. But yeah, we're constantly talking about it between me and him. So we're passing ideas back and forth together as well for whenever we want to jump in each session.
Hey, beautiful, man. It's good to hear. It's good to hear. That these type of discussions, fractaling out some way, somehow, can only be a positive thing. When you guys come back to us and tell us what you guys been getting down on. And I know the last time we got together for a long period of time, we were thinking seriously about educating folks on some of these concepts. Having points of access for folks, and that's a lot of what I think Hero was just speaking to as before you came in. Being able to build in some of these understandings of living constitutions, right? Beyond even a specific PowerPoint or presentation or diagram, that proposal that Juliet and Hero have gotten together for code of conduct, even if it's not explicit there, as long as we ensure to build it in other places, when it's it'll be understood when folks look right at the different clans picking up these different dynamics in conflict resolution or in decision making, so on and so forth. Yeah, I think maybe we can get together on some of this more general thing that I think has come up more and more often as it relates to articulating some of these deeper concepts, right? But also having something for accessibility and more outward-facing, bridge work, right, to these type of discussions. And we were thinking of a combination of Notion and web pages, a lot like how Kernel uses. And I think that's where we left off in our last session. But Hero, you reminded me of this when we're speaking of building this stuff in, in other ways than these specific contexts. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time, but I did want to, spend some time, if we needed to, if there are any questions in, reigniting some of this code of conduct stuff this week, possibly. See what happens with the use of the roles this time. I'd imagine we can have a couple different issues now. The same one that was initiated by Hero and Juliet when it comes to the code of conduct resolution. We spoke to potentially doing this simultaneously along with a specific issue around the addition of the tour wampum dialogue in a more functional way that we spoke to. It's already in our code of conduct, but we can start a new issue, active issue around building it in that deeper way that we spoke to, which I think would be appreciated. And then there's the important conversation around living constitution and living code of conduct and what that means. And I think there's something to declarations too and pledges that we can build into the same process that usually accompanies these oral constitutions in this indigenous context. When there's a coming together of people for a particular effort that's ambitious, but that's worth failing at in a lot of ways, right? To use some of the language you've used here before and heard from the data working group. I think that makes sense. For us as well. I think that there can be a both a women's declaration and a men's declaration, and they can come together in a nice way as well, possibly. But this is some of the flows that we've seen from the Longhouse when it comes to declarations, and it's essentially a code of conduct too, really specific to efforts, right? The mission-like language, as opposed to some of the more specific protocols of flows that are really laid out in the Tua Wampum protocols, right? So in the indigenous context, it's just a quick reference to those protocols, right? As opposed to a laying out of all of those protocols that are oral anyway. But for us, we can have, also our written code of conduct, but to, also have these pledges and declarations accompany the code of conduct would make sense as well. And to build in the Tua Wampum protocols in that way makes sense as well. I mean, it's something that we're doing anyway, with the tooling, so it makes sense to speak to it in the code of conduct. But yeah, these are some of the ways I think these two issues. I know it seems like more than two for whatever reason, because of the declaration and the pledge or the language of pledges or declaration instead of code of conduct. But maybe this is something that we can do something with NFTs as well. As once there's something to attach the NFT to, because there's in the indigenous context, there's wampum belts or onagora that get made along with these declarations, right? And really important symbolism, right? For the ceremony of coming together, and we can do a similar thing. Once the clans get working on it. And so, this is potentially some exciting stuff. Kind of connecting the dots with Web3 and these older means of programming into tokens, right? Physical tokens in that sense. But yeah, let me know if any of this makes sense to you guys. Not just reigniting the conflict resolution, but getting another issue up there specific to the living constitution we spoke to in this session. And yeah, we can have some work on maybe evolves out of those out of the proposals that are needed for the second issue. What Juliet and Hero have done is pretty much a complete proposal already, and they don't have to do any changing to it. But if we want to get this other issue out there simultaneously, maybe we use a little bit of time today if you guys would like, or we can do it asynchronously to just form a basic packaging the way that Juliet and Hero did. We can use their precedents for how we want to frame or package this living constitution discussion. I think it would be a lot of just I don't know what you guys think, making concise some of the things that were spoken to here. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have any ideas on the best ways forward there. But yeah. There's a third issue on my mind too, but I want to see what you guys think about those two first.
So I have some questions, and So my understanding is creating a new active issue, or I guess an initial. I, I'm not sure which comes first. I'm assuming you mentioned about pledges and declarations, and it sounds like those are similar. And that for example, the Women's Clan could make a declaration about um, one of the active issues, or in speaking towards whatever the active issue is, whether it's the code of conduct resolution flow, or another one, whether we're talking about living constitution. So I just wanted to put that out there first as a question before we move into talking about living constitution.
Yeah. Well, I figured the declaration, right? In the indigenous context, they're called declarations, but for us, it can be, our what is a needed oral constitution of our own, right? We can be sure to include the indigenous oral constitution into our code of conduct as well, but to have a declaration that speaks to the use of a living code of conduct, right? So it's really my fault for convoluting the language. 3 different words for one thing, right? Pledge, declaration, code of conduct, all the same thing. It's just the I don't know. I guess the framing of it is a little bit different, right? Whereas a code of conduct is usually a reference to a set of procedures or rules. Folks should be sure not to step on. The declaration is more framed in the language of what you can see a code of conduct as well, right, in terms of mission statements, but it's also very much a pledge or a declaration of coming together with the utmost commitment, right? A lifetime type of commitment to
We missed
not just.
the wind is
Oops,
sort of overtook your voice.
sorry about that. Yeah, let me try to get closer. But yeah, the framing of the code of conduct is a little bit different, I guess, if we're trying to turn it into a declaration or a pledge. That makes the NFTs make that much more sense for the symbolism of ceremony of coming together, agreeing around not around the mission statement, around the different clan design, which is already included in our code of conduct, which is really another reference to the 201 poem, right? But the idea would be to have an opportunity for oral version of code of conduct in the context of these declarations or pledges, right? So not just for particular issues like you said, Juliet, but just in general a general code of conduct. So it would be a means of doing what even Haas suggested before we started using some of this language or thinking this deeply about it, which is having a code of conduct iterated on by more voices than that were already included in it. So we can use the clan flow to do so, but also use the framing of a declaration or a pledge to do so as well, having that much more weight than what I think a lot of code of conducts tend to feel like, which is terms of service, right? And so that particular shift, I think, allows us to tap into things like this inclusion of the 201 poem dialogue in that deeper functional way, but to tap into things like having a living oral constitution of our own, and to say not just say that in the code of conduct, but to have the code of conduct be that lived experience of making that pledge together. So hopefully that makes sense, right? So all of those words, pledge, declaration, code of conduct kind of converge together, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that did answer my question. So just to reiterate, it seems as though when we're talking about this declaration, it's really we've had an opportunity to gather together, whether it's the whole community or women's clan, men's clan, or a different bear, wolf, or turtle. Um, then we're able to communicate and express about a code of conduct that comes from the oral agreements and discussions of the people, and then we set forth a declaration based on that. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I think that can be a unique means to bring a little bit more weight and gravity to code of conducts, which you point out, Juliet. Right, it's such a crucial part of some of the legal frameworks that we should be thinking about seriously, right? That Primavera teaches us about, and if it's such a fundamental part for it to be as overlooked as terms of service as it usually is in communities, is seemingly a fairly dangerous place to be in, right? In Web3, so to use these indigenous modes to guide us away from that and towards it having the type of weight it should have. Seems to make all the sense in the world. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I'm just going to quickly speak because I know there are probably others who have more ideas to share. But I just wanted to say that I think it moves us from a sort of centralized code of conduct that's created by a small group of people. And ours really wasn't, because we had many people involved with the Advocates Code of Conduct. But that idea of that centralized code of conduct, which is like a terms of service, which is basically you agree to this, or or else, sort of, as opposed to moving to a decentralized code of conduct, one that comes and brings in, and where the wolf gathers the voices of the people, and that then we create a declaration on that oral tradition.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing too. Primavera focusing on that in between space and us being able to build that in with saying, look, our code of conduct is really oral, and anything written of our code of conduct is just a reminder of that oral constitution. And this really, I think, could come into important play legally. I think this is what Primavera is getting at with some of her executional theory and some of the focus on code of conduct when it relates to DAOs. But I think we can learn a lot from the flexibility of these oral recitations and being able to refer to those oral recitations as opposed to just the black and white. Really embodying a living constitution that reflects the evolution of the collective rather than a static, expression of the collective, a snapshot of a time or, interpretation. So, no, thank you kindly, Juliet. I'll shut up too. I know we have other folks here. I know we have a new member here. I think it's Jack. Welcome, and Sleepy. It's good to see you. I know it's been some time since we've been able to catch each other, but you caught us deep in the weeds. I think at the tail end of a session here when we're trying to figure out some next steps for the week in terms of using the tooling, ensuring we're putting some thought behind some of the active issues that we can add to some of the testing. We use Hero and Juliet's example so far as a good precedent for a well thought out issue that has a proposal, not just an issue, along with it to get some consensus from folks to add to or take away from as needed. And trying to do the same for some other particular issues around some rehashing of our code of conduct is what you guys just came in on. And it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome. Hopefully you guys don't feel too excluded. These meetings are welcome to everybody, and feel free to introduce yourselves if you'd like to, and catch us up to what you guys been up to if you'd like.
I told Jack that he doesn't have to speak in the first meetings, but if he wants, he can.
Yeah, you don't have
Well,
to.
It's up to him.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I'm not super shy, but I won't take much time either.
Cool, cool.
I'm relatively new to the Stacks community. I think I made my first buy on April 30th of this year. I learned about Stacks from other communities. I've been heavily involved with crypto since 2017. And long story short, I found Sigil. I really enjoy writing. I enjoy blogging a lot. So turns out, through my buddy Atlas, I learned about this program. And here we are. I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, which is trying to educate the community, not just in Stacks, but also try to do a bit of evangelism, if you will. So yeah, that's a pleasure to be here. I won't take up any more time. I'll definitely be around. Gonna learn the ropes here and keep on writing. Thank you.
Hey, it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a pleasure to have you, and you're welcome to these sessions anytime you see us in here. And you're welcome to stay silent or chime in as you feel it's needed or warranted. And yeah, the focus on education is very welcome, appreciated. However you can contribute here, and especially if you already are, thank you kindly. We spoke a little bit to some of our, more specific efforts around education earlier today, and I'm sure those strains of conversation, hopefully you'll find, open, to your folks like yourself to come right into those conversation streams and contribute, right? Much like how you already are, right? But maybe hopefully with just a little bit more added support from folks like Sleepy or Nat, Hero, folks like us that you see in this session. I'm sure be happy to, give any guidance or support any way we can or see as possible. So it's beautiful to have you. Thank you kindly, guys, for coming into the session. But yeah, I hope that made some sense, Hero, and Juliet. Some of these, some of the ways to think about introducing not just the issue that was already up there, but some other issues. We want to think seriously the same way you guys thought seriously about the conflict resolution, or how to package this so it says palatable for other folks that may not have the real-time conversation right off the bat, right? Maybe it's just, the facilitation of the real-time meetings that, and for that particular issue becomes that much more important. When you guys have something really fleshed out and it's possible to be visual, like the conflict resolution, it almost it lends itself really nicely to asynchronous thread work and contributions feedback. But for the type of discussions we've been having in these recent sessions around living constitutions, I know it's very dialogue heavy based, and some of the communication around it, the collective feeling around it. So maybe just getting to those real-time sessions for that particular issue and others will be important in how we approach the post and active issues. A third issue that maybe we want to think about along with these is using a similar diagram that Juliet and Hero, you guys made for the code of conduct, as we're thinking about integrating the clan system into the journeys flow now, more seriously and intricately. That type of diagram makes a lot of sense for that purpose as well. So maybe there's a third proposal that makes do of some of our efforts around outward-facing language for journeys and diagramming for journeys. It goes into a nice proposal of, officially for journeys, right? With all of the new ins and outs that we've been thinking about, available for consensus for the rest of the community beyond us that have been, thinking pretty hard about it for the past few weeks, right? Months, really. So, I want to throw that out there on the table, see what you guys think too, before we get out of here, and hopefully work together to get these issues out there.
Yeah, I'll just. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yes, I
I'll
can.
just say I think I'm quite clear, like what things are on the table um, to be done or discussed, so to speak. Um, yeah, I think a couple of those things like might need. I think we touched on a little bit earlier or earlier this week that perhaps some better structured or some template of how the active issue could be written. I think that may help. But I think that's like a minor point. But I think yes, I think basically there's the living code of conduct thing to be raised as an issue, and the declaration thing to be raised as an issue, and perhaps the outward facing journey thing. I don't know whether this is an issue or is it just just something to be done.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? You know, it's kind of like how the proposal from yourself and Juliet, you know, had to be done before it could be, one of the best precedents for an issue that we have. Rather than just an open-ended, grievance or issue. To have something well thought out like that is nice, and so to have that for journeys would be nice to engender the discussion beyond just ourselves. I think so. You know, with journeys, living constitution and declarations are really the same thing. I think, and we can have more clarity on that if we need it. And then just the reignition of your code of conduct, conflict resolution diagram and proposal. Those three, I think that's what makes up the three issues, and um, we can work asynchronously, right? I'll make sure to ping everybody here, that was involved in this session, and see if you guys are down to work asynchronously or get together on another call potentially this week if it makes sense. Hero, you yourself and Juliet as well. You guys can, I think, reignite that issue that you guys tried to ignite the first time. You can do it again. Hopefully, the new roles help it flow better, and other folks step up to help facilitate it to the rest of the clan if possible. And so, yeah. Hopefully that that can be done right away, right? Whereas other things we maybe want to do the due diligence that you guys did for that first one before we broadcast it out there, and it'll I think lend itself to some of that template making that you mentioned, Hero, which I think you're correct in, potentially in the especially in the things that aren't as visual as some of that diagramming that you guys did. So I think this would be nice to come together on and to focus on, in addition to facilitating that first issue you guys already worked so hard on. And thank you kindly for that. As I said, the Longhouse kind of described exactly what you guys did when it comes to a properly lodged issue, and we don't have any reps yet, so it's fairly impressive, I think. And welcome. Yeah, Hero.
So I do have one question regarding the current join request does say start here, and start here does have a code of conduct. I just looked,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
Stacks Advocates. It links to GitHub
Mm-hmm.
Stacks Advocates code of conduct. So we basically, I mean, I don't know that everybody's read it, but I guess
Mm-hmm.
in the future when we have our Stacks Advocates code of conduct properly
Mm-hmm.
written and oral form, that would
Mm-hmm.
probably replace that current what's in place, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was always the intention, right? As code of conducts tend to be in GitHub's, right? Like, and GitHub open sources, tend to be used for, right? It's just iteration and improvement, and that was the case for the code of conduct. But we understand some of the limitations of GitHub, right? Feeling a little bit more, restricted to technical folks, professional folks. I've heard folks refer to it as the new LinkedIn in a lot of ways, right? Which, it's not so conducive to some of the accessibility and horizontality things that we want to achieve, whether it's grants program stuff or whether it's code of conduct stuff, right? And so, of course, that can be iterated on, but the way we iterate on it will be through, what we've described in the tooling and flows in these sessions, and hopefully that, gets a little bit more precise of black and white code of conduct, right? But as you said, in that start here, we can emphasize the oral, uh, the oral legalities of the code of conduct as well. Maybe link to recordings if we have a recitation already by that point as well. Yeah, it should be there in the code of conduct as well. So in the next iterations of it. So we'll just iterate on that code of conduct in the GitHub as we intended, but we'll we'll be thinking seriously about the flows to get there, as opposed to just hoping the folks file in the way we did the first time, which we're grateful for the folks who did. A lot of what Friedger added to some of that code of conduct in terms of feedback that Juliet and Ryder and folks made sure to ask for was actually the inclusion of 201 poem influences and how to access that dialogue, right? So it's remembering this that helped us click together all of these realizations and connections to Primavera de Filippi's work at Harvard, and it's just a nice wraps everything we're doing in a nice little bow when you consider all the tooling coming out of work from Primavera de Filippi and whatnot as well. So this is exciting in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds great.
yeah.
So Jack, you welcome. I hope
Yes,
you get a rough idea of what this place is about.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I still have a lot of catching up to do, but one way or the other, I'll add value.
yes, you will. Yeah, you already are.
That's my
Just
goal.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you
Just by
seems to really like writing. Like you're good at like writing blogs or written form of communication stuff, right? By the sound of it.
Yeah, that tends to be my strong point. I'm not a tech guy. I know how to work with crypto, but I couldn't write a piece of a contract. You know what I'm saying? But I am very good at communicating, and I'm also very good at helping people understand. There's a vast underserved demographic in crypto, and honestly, I think you could just say most of Gen X on up to boomers, they have very, very little. Although talking with people, everyone at this point knows about Bitcoin, they know about Doge, there's been enough coverage. But I feel like one of the things we have to do moving forward is to find people at their level. And really, where you find people at their level, in my experience, has been a very simple conversation. What is the money in your bank? What actually gives it value? And from there, you can start to make people understand a little bit about the conversation, the nature of the conversation being crypto and obviously Bitcoin and stacks, right? So, yeah, I have some ideas. I want to do a bit of journalism. Also, I feel like this is a pretty important historical timepiece to chronicle. As we see people who are not only getting into crypto as they start to realize, oh wow, we've got this inflation problem with fiat currency, but you actually have entire cities starting to experiment with this technology that's in it that really has one of the things, for instance, I'd like to do. I want to go to Austin this summer and just talk to people, not just people that are in the stacks community, working on a City Coins project, but just regular people, see where their heads are. The last piece I wrote was about a trip to the store in my own town, just see it on people's faces in their shopping right now, and when you get right down to it, You know, Bitcoin is